Silver Creek was the type of town where the air felt familiar, where the smell of pine and crisp autumn leaves mixed with the distant hum of life. In the late afternoon, the streets were quiet, save for the occasional car passing by or a jogger making their way through the park. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, or at least they thought they did. Lily Carter had always been the bright, driven type. At 22, she was in her final year at the University of Colorado, studying environmental science with plans to change the world. Her mother, Sarah, couldn't have been prouder. Despite the distance between their home in Silver Creek and the college in Boulder, they stayed close. They spoke every day, their conversations filled with laughter, love, and the occasional motherly lecture. On the night of October 17th, Lily called her mother. They had spoken only an hour before, but this time, her voice was different. It was faint, urgent even. "Mom, I think I'm being followed," she said, her voice quivering, the kind of quiver Sarah had never heard before. "I'm heading to a safe place. I'll call you soon." But that call never came. The following morning, Sarah's first instinct was to check Lily's social media. She found nothing alarming, just the usual photos of campus events, a selfie with friends, and a few snapshots of the hikes Lily loved to take in the nearby mountains. But then Sarah noticed something. Lily's car was missing from its usual parking spot in the driveway. Sarah's heart dropped into her stomach. She immediately called Lily's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Panic set in as the hours dragged on, and by noon, Sarah knew something was terribly wrong. She contacted the police, who were quick to respond. They found Lily's car, a 2014 Toyota Corolla, parked on the side of a desolate road that led to the outskirts of the woods. The engine was still warm, and the door was left ajar. The police scoured the area, but there were no signs of Lily, no footprints, no clues, not even the slightest indication of where she had gone. Her phone was still inside the car, its screen cracked, but nothing more. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The morning after Lily's car was found, Silver Creek was shrouded in an uneasy tension. The town, usually so peaceful and sleepy, now buzzed with uncertainty and fear. Local police worked tirelessly with state investigators, their efforts concentrated on the area surrounding the woods. Time was slipping away, and every passing hour without a lead felt like a strike against finding Lily alive. Detective Mike Turner, a no-nonsense veteran of the Silver Creek Police Department, had seen his fair share of missing persons cases, but something about Lily's disappearance felt different. This wasn't just another runaway or accidental disappearance. The way her car had been left behind, untouched, unsettled him. The lack of evidence, no signs of a struggle, no blood, not even footprints in the dust, suggested that Lily hadn't simply wandered off. She had been taken, or something more sinister had happened. Turner organized search teams to comb through the woods, using cadaver dogs, drones, and infrared scanners in hopes of finding something, anything. The woods, dense and filled with overgrown foliage, were a challenging environment to search, but they had no choice. Lily's fate seemed intertwined with the mystery of those trees. Meanwhile, Sarah Carter was losing hope. Every phone call, every conversation with the police felt like a hollow promise. They hadn't found anything. Days turned into an agonizing blur, and as the media began to pick up the story, more and more volunteers showed up to help search the area. The town, despite its fear and confusion, rallied together to look for Lily. But the longer she was missing, the more the dark thoughts began to cloud Sarah's mind. Was she being held somewhere? Had something gone terribly wrong? At the police station, Turner spoke to Lily's friends and family, piecing together the fragments of her life. It wasn't long before one of Lily's college friends, Emma, came forward with something unsettling. Emma had received a late-night text from Lily just hours before her disappearance. The message read, "Mom, I think I'm being followed. I'm heading to a safe place. I'll call you soon." But Emma, lost in her own world at the time, hadn't responded quickly enough. By the time she saw the message, Lily was already gone. Turner's gut told him that whoever was following Lily might hold the key to finding her. But every answer seemed to open up more questions, and the clock was ticking. It had been nearly a week since Lily's disappearance, and frustration had begun to settle in like a thick fog over the town of Silver Creek. Despite their best efforts, the police had found nothing new. No new clues, no sign of Lily. The search had expanded beyond the woods and into the surrounding hills, but each effort seemed to bring them further from the answers they desperately needed. Detective Mike Turner had begun to question everything. As a seasoned investigator, he knew how cases like this could go. Cold, quickly forgotten, with no trace of the missing person left behind. But Lily's case didn't feel like that. It was personal. Something was off. And Turner couldn't shake the feeling that the key to unlocking the mystery was buried somewhere within the dense woods surrounding Silver Creek. One cold morning after another fruitless search, Turner decided to return to the spot where Lily's car had been found. He walked the area slowly, retracing his steps from the previous days, trying to see something he had missed. That's when he noticed them. Faint, barely visible footprints. They were almost hidden beneath a blanket of fallen leaves, but they were there, leading deeper into the forest. These footprints were not from Lily. They were much larger and seemed to belong to someone who had walked there recently. And what caught Turner's attention most was that the prints were barefoot. Whoever had left them behind had walked with no shoes, their bare feet leaving a distinct, slightly unsettling trail across the forest floor. Turner felt a chill run down his spine. These were fresh. They weren't the type of prints that would be left by someone casually walking through the woods. They were purposeful, deliberate, and they led toward something even more curious. The abandoned cabin that stood at the edge of the woods, forgotten by most of the town's residents. The cabin had been there for years, a relic of another time, and although it had once been a place for hunters and travelers, it had long since been abandoned. No one had paid attention to it in decades. But now, as Turner approached the cabin, he could feel his pulse quicken. He followed the footprints to the doorway, his hand hovering near his gun. Inside, there was nothing at first glance. Just old furniture covered in dust, broken windows, and the smell of mildew. But as Turner's eyes scanned the room, something caught his attention. There, in the center of the floor, was a single sneaker. It wasn't Lily's, but it was fresh. New even. Someone had been here recently, and they had left behind more than just a footprint. As Detective Turner continued his investigation, the unsettling discovery of the barefoot prints and the abandoned cabin only deepened the mystery. Silver Creek, with its picturesque streets and quiet reputation, seemed like the last place anyone would expect to uncover buried secrets. But the more Turner dug, the more he realized that the town had a dark history, one that had been carefully hidden beneath layers of time and silence. He began researching the area's past, talking to old-timers and town historians who had lived in Silver Creek long before the growth spurt of recent years. It was during one of these conversations with Dr. Claire Montague, the town's local historian, that Turner began to uncover unsettling information. Dr. Montague had always been the keeper of Silver Creek's history, and over the years she had compiled countless records and stories about the town's origins. She had also spent years studying the strange, unsolved disappearances that had plagued the town for decades. There was one case in particular that stood out, a disappearance that had happened over 40 years ago, in 1,983 days. Ruth Williams, a local woman in her late 20s, had vanished without a trace. The investigation into her disappearance had gone nowhere, and her case had eventually been forgotten. Dr. Montague handed Turner a folder filled with old newspaper clippings and photographs. He flipped through the pages, his eyes narrowing as he read about the series of disappearances that seemed to coincide with Ruth Williams' case. There was no definitive connection between the disappearances, but the patterns were undeniable. Each one involved a young person, often from out of town, who had been in the vicinity of the same stretch of woods or near the abandoned cabin. After the disappearances, the cases were closed, with little more than half-hearted attempts to solve them. But there was more. Dr. Montague's research hinted at the possibility of a secret group that had been operating in Silver Creek for decades. People who had ties to the town's wealthiest families. Those with enough influence to bury the truth. The group had been involved in dark activities, the specifics of which were only whispered about by locals, who feared speaking out. What was clear, however, was that these people would stop at nothing to keep their secrets safe. Turner's thoughts raced. Could this group be responsible for Lily's disappearance? Had she stumbled upon something that she wasn't supposed to? The more he thought about it, the more the pieces began to fit together. As the investigation progressed, Detective Turner's sense of urgency grew stronger. The more he unearthed about Silver Creek's hidden history, the clearer it became that Lily's disappearance was not a random event. It was linked to something far darker. Turner's gut told him that Lily hadn't simply wandered into the woods or been taken by chance. She had discovered something she wasn't supposed to, and whoever was involved wasn't going to let her walk away. Then, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Lily's best friend, Emma. Emma had been devastated when she learned that Lily was missing, but it wasn't until a second conversation with Turner that something peculiar came to light. Emma mentioned, almost absent-mindedly, that Lily had been acting differently in the days before her disappearance. She had been nervous, jumpy, even paranoid at times. But the most unsettling detail was a series of text messages Lily had received just days before her vanishing. At first, Emma thought they were just prank messages, or a strange coincidence. But when Turner asked Emma to look through her phone, Emma found something troubling. Lily had been receiving cryptic texts from an unknown number, messages that grew more disturbing with each passing day. The first message simply read, "Stop asking questions." It was brief but unsettling. Then came another, "You're getting too close to the truth, leave it alone." The tone was threatening but vague, leaving Emma to wonder if Lily had been involved in something she wasn't prepared for. The final message that Lily had received was more direct. "If you don't stop digging, you'll regret it." That message had arrived just hours before Lily sent her final text to her mother, the one about feeling followed. Turner's blood ran cold as he processed the information. Someone had been watching Lily, someone who knew she was uncovering things about Silver Creek's hidden past. This wasn't a random disappearance. It was targeted. Lily had crossed a line, and she had paid the price for it. Determined to find out who was behind these cryptic messages, Turner began tracing the phone number that had sent them. The number led to a burner phone purchased with cash at a small convenience store just outside Silver Creek. The person behind the phone had been careful to cover their tracks, but Turner wasn't going to let that stop him. The trail led him to a man named Jack Miller, a reclusive former resident of Silver Creek who had disappeared from the town years ago. Turner knew this was no coincidence. Jack Miller had left town under mysterious circumstances, and now he was back. But why? And what was his connection to Lily's disappearance? Detective Turner's investigation had reached a boiling point. Every lead had pointed to one man, Jack Miller. The reclusive former resident of Silver Creek had returned under mysterious circumstances, and Turner now had a hunch that Jack was the key to everything. He had been tied to the abandoned cabin, the strange footprints, and the cryptic texts Lily had received. But the question remained, why was Jack Miller so heavily involved in the disappearance of Lily Carter? After tracking down Miller's current whereabouts, Turner arrived at a rundown house just outside Silver Creek. The place was secluded, hidden by overgrown trees and vines, almost as if it was intentionally cut off from the rest of the world. Turner knocked on the door, his hand resting on the side of his gun. Jack Miller opened the door with a wary, almost fearful expression, his clothes disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. "What do you want?" Jack's voice trembled, but there was a harsh edge to it. "I need to talk to you about Lily Carter," Turner said, his voice steady but firm. At the mention of Lily's name, Jack's face went pale. He quickly stepped back from the door, and Turner followed him inside, carefully scanning the space. The house was dark, with only a few lamps casting flickering light across the walls. There were piles of old newspapers and half-empty coffee cups scattered across the room. But amidst the disarray, there was a single item that caught Turner's eye. A worn, leather-bound journal sitting on the table. Jack didn't make eye contact as Turner sat down at the table. His eyes shifted nervously, and his fingers twitched. After a long, painful silence, Jack finally spoke. "She wasn't supposed to find out," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "Lily, she was digging into things she shouldn't have. Things that have been buried in Silver Creek for years." Turner's heart raced as he pressed Jack for more. It all came out in a rush. The secret group that had operated in Silver Creek for decades, a group with ties to powerful families in the town. The group's activities were dark, and over the years, they had silenced anyone who got too close. When Lily began asking questions, she was seen as a threat. Her curiosity had led her to uncover evidence of the group's hidden operations, and they couldn't afford to let her expose them. Jack admitted he had been part of the group years ago, but had left when he realized how far they were willing to go to protect their secrets. But the group had never truly let him go. They had come for him when he left, threatening his life and those he cared about. When Lily started investigating, Jack had tried to warn her, sending the cryptic texts, but in the end, it was too late. They had already taken her. Turner sat back, his mind racing. The truth about Lily's disappearance was far darker than he had imagined. It wasn't just about a missing girl. It was about a conspiracy that reached into the very heart of Silver Creek, a conspiracy that had been buried beneath layers of time, fear, and secrecy. The case had been solved, but the implications were only beginning to sink in. Turner knew that Silver Creek's dark past wasn't done yet, and the group responsible for Lily's fate was still out there, waiting for the next person to dig too deep.